There is something you have felt, but never been able to name. A presence that lingers after a conversation ends. A silence that feels too loud to be empty. A person who disappeared from your life, but somehow never left your mind. And when you stop long enough to be honest with yourself, you wonder if maybe, just maybe, you never left theirs either. You have felt it, haven't you? That quiet, almost electric awareness that someone is carrying you somewhere inside them. Not in an obvious way. Not in the way where they text you every morning or say the words out loud, but in the way where you catch them looking a half second too long. In the way where they know things about your life they should have forgotten by now. In the way where they reappear at moments that feel too perfectly timed to be random. In the way where something between you refuses to fully close, no matter how many doors either of you tries to shut. That feeling you keep dismissing as your imagination. Carl Jung would tell you to pay attention to it, because Jung understood something about the human mind that most people spend their entire lives never learning. He understood that what we feel most deeply, we often hide most carefully. He understood that the most powerful forces in human relationships do not live in what is spoken. They live in what is suppressed. They live in what is circled around. They live in what keeps returning quietly and persistently, like a tide that does not know how to stop reaching for the shore. And right now, as you are listening to this, there is a very real possibility that someone in your life is experiencing exactly that. A pull toward you they cannot rationalize. A fixation they would never openly confess. A secret, quiet, almost sacred obsession with who you are, what you represent, and the feeling that being near you creates inside them. A feeling they have not been able to find anywhere else, no matter how hard they have tried. Stay with me, because by the time this is over, you're going to understand not just why this happens, but what it really means. And I promise you, what it means is far more profound than you expect. Jung spent decades studying the hidden architecture of the human mind. He mapped the unconscious the way explorers once mapped continents, slowly, carefully, with enormous respect for how much territory remained unknown. And one of the most important things he discovered was this: we do not experience other people the way we think we do. We do not fall for someone's resume. We do not obsess over someone's logical qualities. We do not lie awake thinking about someone because they were punctual or organized or financially stable. We obsess over people because of what they activate inside us, because of what they awaken, because of what they reflect back to us about ourselves, our longings, our wounds, our unlived stories, and our deepest, most secret sense of who we could become if only we allowed ourselves to. That is the foundation of Jungian psychology. And it is the key to understanding why someone, right now, may be privately, quietly, intensely obsessed with you. Think about this carefully. Every single human being carries inside them what Jung called the unconscious. It is not a poetic metaphor. It is a real, active, dynamic part of the mind. It holds everything we have experienced, everything we have repressed, everything we were taught to hide, everything we secretly desire, everything we fear, every wound that never fully healed, every dream we stopped letting ourselves have. The unconscious is not passive. It is not a storage room where old feelings collect dust. It is alive. It is constantly working. And it communicates not through logic, but through emotion, through instinct, through the inexplicable pull we feel towards certain people, and the inexplicable inability we have to let certain people go. And here is where it gets deeply personal. Here is where I want you to sit with this for a moment before I continue. Some of the most intense, most consuming, most life-altering obsessions people develop do not begin with grand, romantic gestures. They begin with a single moment of recognition, a moment where two people meet and something beneath the surface of conscious thought says, quietly and without explanation, this person is significant. And that recognition, once it happens in the unconscious mind, does not ask permission to grow. It does not wait for the right timing. It does not care about logic, availability, distance, or circumstance. It simply grows, in the dark, in the silence, in all the spaces between what is said and what is felt. Someone in your life may be living inside that silence right now. Let me paint this in a way you will recognize, because abstract psychology only becomes real when it touches something you have already lived. Imagine a woman. She is intelligent. She is quietly captivating in a way she does not fully see in herself. She has a presence that is warm but also layered, the kind of presence that makes you feel like there is more beneath the surface than she has ever shown anyone. She meets a man at an ordinary moment. Maybe it is through friends. Maybe it is at work. Maybe it is a chance encounter that seems insignificant at the time. They talk. Maybe for an hour. Maybe for an evening. There is something easy between them. Something natural, something that makes both of them feel slightly more awake than usual. And then life continues. They go their separate ways. Weeks pass, maybe months. From the outside, nothing happened. No relationship began. No declaration was made. But inside this man, something did not close. Something stayed open. Your name appears somewhere, and his attention sharpens before his brain registers why. He hears a song, and for a reason he cannot entirely explain, your face appears. He starts a conversation with someone else, but finds himself measuring her against a feeling he associates with you. He tells himself he is not thinking about you. And then he thinks about you. That is not a story I invented for this video. That is Jungian psychology described through human experience. That is the unconscious at work. That is projection, activation, and emotional imprinting, all happening beneath the level of conscious awareness. And the woman in that story, the one he cannot stop returning to in his mind, very likely senses it. Not because she is reading his diary, but because the human nervous system is exquisitely sensitive to being held in someone's attention. We feel it in ways we cannot always articulate. We notice the extra beat before he answers. We notice how he remembers the small things. We notice how the energy between us carries a weight that feels different from ordinary conversation. We notice, and then we question ourselves for noticing, because we have been taught to dismiss our own perception. Jung would say, do not dismiss it. He would say, your perception is picking up on something real, something the other person is projecting outward, even when they are trying to contain it. Now, let us go deeper, because the mechanics of why this happens reveal something extraordinary about human nature. Jung introduced a concept he called the shadow. The shadow is not the villain of the psyche. It is not the dark side in the simplistic way people sometimes describe it. The shadow is everything we have not yet integrated about ourselves, everything we were taught to suppress, every part of us that was labeled too much or not enough, every desire we were shamed for, every softness we were told to harden, every wild, vulnerable, hungry, tender, powerful piece of ourselves that we learned to hide in order to survive. And here is the critical insight. What lives in the shadow does not disappear. It projects. It reaches outward. It searches in the external world for what it cannot find permission to be in the internal world. This means that when someone becomes secretly obsessed with you, they may not even be seeing you clearly. They may be seeing you through the lens of their own shadow. You may have walked into their life at the exact moment when some suppressed part of themselves was ready to be recognized. And something about you, your confidence, your emotional openness, your mystery, your softness, your strength, your independence, your warmth, your refusal to shrink, your laughter, the way you carry yourself, the way you look at the world, triggered a recognition so deep it bypassed all their defenses. You became a mirror for something they have been searching for inside themselves. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most psychologically significant experiences a person can have, and it creates an obsession that does not behave like ordinary attraction. Ordinary attraction fades when the object of attraction becomes unavailable. But shadow projection does not fade so easily, because it is not really about you. It is about the feeling you awakened in them. It is about the part of themselves they saw reflected in you. And the more they suppress that, the more intensely you occupy their inner world. This is why some people cannot stop thinking about someone they barely know. This is why some people replay a single conversation for years. This is why some people are still emotionally entangled with a person who has been physically absent from their lives for a long time. The connection was never only physical. It was psychological. It was symbolic. It went somewhere deeper than the surface ever reached. And I want to ask you something now, something I want you to really sit with. Has there been someone in your life who felt larger than the amount of time you actually spent together? Someone who left an impression that seemed disproportionate to the relationship you had? Someone who you sensed was still present somehow, even when they were nowhere near you? Someone whose name, when it appears, creates a feeling in your chest that is difficult to categorize? Someone who the universe, or whatever you believe in, keeps somehow returning to the edges of your life? If there is, then you already understand intuitively what Jung spent his career explaining intellectually. Some connections are not logical. Some connections operate on a frequency that the rational mind cannot fully map. And when a person becomes obsessed with you on that deeper level, they are operating on that frequency. They are drawn by something their conscious mind cannot fully explain or justify, which is precisely why they often say nothing, why they often go quiet, why they often create distance while simultaneously being incapable of true absence. Because how do you explain something you do not have language for? How do you walk up to someone and say, "You have become a symbol in my inner world. You have awakened something in me that I do not fully understand"? You feel like the answer to a question I did not know I was asking. You do not. Most people do not have that level of self-awareness, and even those who do rarely have the courage to say it out loud. So they express it in every other way. They express it through their attention, through their timing, through the things they remember, through the questions they ask, through the way they react when you give your attention to someone else, through the way they appear when you stop expecting them, through the way they pause, always, just a moment too long when you are near. The language of secret obsession is written in behavior, not in words. Now here is something I want you to understand about yourself. And I mean this in the deepest, most sincere way. You did not accidentally create this. Something about who you are is psychologically magnetic, not in a manipulative way, not in a performance, but in a genuine, intrinsic way. There is something about the particular combination of qualities you carry, the way you hold your pain alongside your warmth, the way you are strong in some places and soft in others, the way you contain contradictions that make people feel like they will never fully figure you out. And that feeling, that sense that there is always more to discover, that is one of the most powerful forces in human attraction. Jung described this kind of psychological complexity as the anima. In the deepest Jungian framework, the anima is the soul image. It is the inner feminine presence that lives within the psyche of those drawn to feminine energy, an image of what they most deeply long for in another, not just physically but psychically, emotionally, spiritually. And when a person encounters someone who matches or mirrors their soul image, even partially, even imperfectly, the effect is like recognition, not attraction, not simple desire, recognition, as if some part of them has been waiting, searching, and suddenly turned a corner and found what it was looking for. And when that happens, ordinary logic does not apply. When that happens, the person cannot simply decide to stop thinking about you. The psyche does not respond to decisions the way we wish it did. The psyche responds to meaning. And if you have become meaningful to someone on that level, quietly, secretly, deeply, then the obsession is not a choice they made. It is a response they cannot entirely control. Now, I want to be honest with you here, because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve to be told only what feels good. Not every secret obsession is love. Not every person who cannot stop thinking about you is someone who would be good for you. Not every fixation that feels intense is built on something real. Some obsessions are built on projection alone, on fantasy, on the desperate need to assign meaning to something because the alternative is to sit alone inside an inner world that feels empty. Some people are not obsessed with who you are. They are obsessed with who you allow them to feel they could be. That is an important distinction, and Jung made it clearly. Projection sees an image. Love eventually learns to see a person. Projection maintains intensity because it is never truly confronted by reality. The moment reality enters, projection either transforms into something genuine or it shatters. And when it shatters, the person who was obsessed can sometimes become distant, so suddenly it feels like whiplash. Because they were never truly attached to you. They were attached to the story they were telling about you inside their own mind. This is why you must hold this awareness with both openness and discernment. You can acknowledge that someone is carrying you in their inner world without surrendering your own. You can feel the weight of their silent attention without building your sense of worth on it. You can understand the psychology without needing to rescue them from it, without needing to play the role their obsession has assigned you, without allowing their fixation to determine your decisions. Because here is what I most want you to hear. Here is the thing that Jung spent his entire life circling back to in different ways. The most important relationship you will ever navigate is not the one between you and the person who cannot stop thinking about you. It is the relationship between you and your own inner world, between you and your own shadow, between you and the parts of yourself you have not yet given permission to be fully seen. Because the truth is, the reason certain people project so intensely onto you, the reason you awaken something in others that they cannot name or contain, is partly because you yourself are still in the process of becoming. You are still integrating. You are still discovering. You are still in that luminous, complicated, deeply human process of figuring out who you actually are underneath the roles you have played, the expectations you have carried, the version of yourself you made presentable for the world. And there is something about a woman in that process, not a woman who has arrived at some finished, polished conclusion, but a woman who is genuinely in the messy, beautiful, honest process of knowing herself that is almost unbearably magnetic. Not because she is performing, but because she is real, because she is unfinished in the way all living things are unfinished, because she contains both the wound and the wisdom, both the softness and the steel, both the part that reached for love and the part that learned to protect itself. That complexity lives inside you, and it calls to something in others that is looking for permission to be complex too. So when you feel that someone is secretly obsessed with you, when you sense the weight of their attention from across a room or across a silence or across a distance of months or years, do not shrink from it, but do not lose yourself in it either. Let it remind you of something true. You are the kind of person who leaves an impression on the interior life of others. You are the kind of presence that does not simply pass through someone's awareness and disappear. You are the kind of woman whose energy echoes in places she has never physically been. That is not a small thing. That is, in the language of Jung, a genuine psychological phenomenon. And it points not to some mysterious power you were given, but to the depth of character you have cultivated, perhaps without even fully realizing it. Now let me bring this full circle, because I started this by asking you to pay attention to a feeling, the feeling that someone is carrying you somewhere inside them, the feeling that a connection has not fully closed, even though the chapter seems to have ended, the feeling that certain silences are not empty, but full of things that have not yet been said, full of a presence that refuses to dissolve. And I want to offer you one final Jungian truth before we close. The things we are most obsessed with, the people who occupy us most deeply, the connections that refuse to fully release us, they are never only about the other person. They are always also about something in ourselves that has not yet been resolved, something that is still searching, something that is still asking a question it has not received a clear answer to. So if someone is secretly obsessed with you, the question worth asking is not only, why are they so fixated on me? The question worth asking is, what does this tell me about what I carry? What does this tell me about what I radiate into the world without even trying? What wound, what gift, what quality, what presence in me is so charged that it enters someone else's psyche and sets something alive in them that they cannot shut off? Because when you can answer that question, you move from being the object of someone else's obsession to being the subject of your own deep self-understanding. And that, in the end, is what Jung was always pointing toward. Not the obsession, not the other person, not the longing or the projection or the unresolved pull. He was pointing toward the self, toward the interior life, toward the profound, lifelong, utterly worthy work of becoming someone who knows who she is, someone who has met her own shadow and found, to her amazement, that it was not as frightening as she feared, someone who has felt the weight of another person's silent devotion and chosen not to be defined by it, but to be clarified by it. You are already that person. You may not have the language for it yet. You may not have given yourself permission to believe it yet. But the fact that you are here, listening, searching, asking these deeper questions about human nature and your own experience, that is not coincidence. That is the unconscious leading you toward something true. And somewhere, in the quiet of another person's mind, in the silence between their words, in the timing of their reappearance, in the way they remember what they should have forgotten, you are still there. Because some presences do not fade. Because some impressions are made not on the surface, but on the soul. And because once the unconscious decides that someone is significant, no amount of logic, distance, or time can fully convince it to let go. That is the psychology of secret obsession. That is the hidden architecture of what someone feels when they cannot stop thinking about you. And now, you understand it not just intellectually, but somewhere deeper. Somewhere that was already waiting to recognize the truth.